Once upon a time in a quiet coastal town, a young artist named Emma spent her days painting the sea. Her studio overlooked the ocean, and every morning she would watch the sunrise cast golden hues over the waves, capturing the light with each stroke of her brush. She believed love was something distant, something that lived only in the pages of books and the lyrics of old songs. One rainy afternoon, as Emma browsed a local bookstore for inspiration, she bumped into a man named Lucas, a writer who had just moved to town seeking solitude for his next novel. Their eyes met over a dropped book, and a conversation began that neither of them wanted to end. They spoke about art and literature, about their dreams and fears, and somehow, the rain outside became the soft soundtrack to something new blooming between them. Days turned into weeks, and they began to share their worlds. Emma showed Lucas how colors could speak, and Lucas read her chapters of his stories, each one subtly inspired by her laughter, her silences, and the way she stared at the horizon as if waiting for something. They were different. She was spontaneous. He was thoughtful. But together, they were whole. Seasons changed, and so did they, but their bond only grew stronger. Love came quietly without grand gestures or declarations, but in the way Lucas brought her coffee just the way she liked it, and how Emma painted a small seagull into every canvas she made because it reminded her of the first time they met. One summer evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lucas took Emma's hand and said, "You were the story I didn't know I was writing." And with a quiet smile, she replied, "And you were the color I never thought I'd find." And so their story continued, not perfect, but real, painted in words and colors, with love at its heart. Years passed, but their love never faded. It deepened, like the ocean they had always lived beside. Life wasn't always easy. There were days when Emma's inspiration vanished, when her canvas stayed blank for weeks. There were nights when Lucas doubted his words, crumpling pages and questioning if he had anything left to say. But through every struggle, they stood by each other. Not always with solutions, but always with presence. They learned that love was not a constant thrill, but a quiet choosing, over and over again. In shared glances during dinner, in warm hands found beneath cold sheets, in small apologies and long walks under gray skies. Their home became a haven, not grand or filled with riches, but with stories and paintings, with music echoing through open windows and the smell of fresh bread in the morning. Friends came and went. Life changed around them, but the bond between them remained untouched, like the tide that always returned. One autumn, Emma surprised Lucas with a gallery exhibition, her first in years. The walls were filled with her paintings, seascapes, memories, and hidden among them, a series titled Us. Each piece captured a moment, a first glance, a long embrace, the feather he once brought her. Lucas walked through the room in silence, heart swelling with emotion. When he turned to her at the end, his voice was low. "You've turned our love into something eternal," she smiled. "We already were." They grew older, gently and beautifully. Wrinkles came and so did gray hairs, but so did deeper laughter, softer mornings, and a peace that only comes with time and trust. They spent quiet evenings rereading old letters, watching the sea as if it still held secrets. Sometimes they would sit in silence, hands entwined, and know that nothing more needed to be said. And when the time came, when the world grew still around them and one of them had to carry on alone, it was not a goodbye, but a quiet promise whispered into the wind. Because love, when true, doesn't end. It lives in every painted sky, in every written word, in every corner of a heart that once knew it fully. And somewhere, always, their story continues. Emma stayed by the sea, in the home they had built with love and filled with memories. After Lucas passed, the world felt quieter, like a song missing its final note. At first, the silence was unbearable. The echoes of his voice lingered in every room, in every page of his books, still stacked neatly on the shelves, in the worn sweater he had left draped over his favorite chair. Grief came in waves, sudden and fierce. But Emma knew, even in her sadness, that love had not left her. It had only changed form. She painted again, not for the world, but for him. Her colors softened, misty blues, warm grays, soft pastels that held whispers of their shared life. Every canvas was a memory, and in every brushstroke she felt him there. Friends came by often, drawn not only by her kindness but by the quiet strength in her eyes, the kind that only those who have deeply loved and deeply lost carry. One day, a young girl from the village knocked on Emma's door. She was holding a copy of Lucas's book, its corners worn and underlined with care. "Your story," she said shyly, "changed the way I see love." Emma smiled, invited her in, and for the first time in a while began to tell their story, not with sadness, but with warmth. She spoke of serendipity, of stolen glances and rainy afternoons, of letters and waiting, of staying and returning. The girl listened, wide-eyed, and Emma could see the same hope in her that she had once carried. As the years passed, Emma became a quiet legend in the town, the painter by the sea, the keeper of a great love. Her house remained filled with flowers and light, always open to those who needed a kind word or a story to believe in. One clear morning, after finishing a painting of the sunrise, just like the one from the day they met, Emma sat in her chair facing the sea. A soft breeze drifted through the window, and for a moment she swore she heard Lucas's voice in it. "I never left," it seemed to say. And she smiled, setting her brush down gently, heart full, soul quiet. Because their love had never really ended. It had become part of the tide, the wind, the stars above the ocean. A story not bound by time, but carried forward, painted in the sky, whispered in pages, and held forever in the hearts of those who believed in love that never fades. The years moved gently, like the turning pages of a well-loved book. Emma grew older, her hair silver like the moonlight on the sea, her hands slower but still steady with a brush. The village around her changed. New houses, new families, children growing up, but her little cottage remained a quiet lighthouse of memory and meaning. Every morning she walked the same path along the cliffs where she and Lucas had once strolled, hand in hand. The sea never stopped moving, never stopped speaking, and Emma listened. She found peace in its rhythm, comfort in its eternity. One day, as the sky turned golden with the evening sun, Emma stood in her studio finishing what would become her final painting. It was simple. Two figures walking into the light, their shadows stretching long behind them, their hands joined. The sea sparkled beside them, endless and open. She called it the return. That night, Emma went to bed feeling something different. Not sadness, not pain, but a quiet fullness, as if the circle of her life had gently closed. She fell asleep to the sound of waves and dreams filled with light. In the morning, the village woke to find her peacefully passed, the final chapter of her story written not with words, but with grace. The painting stood on her easel, untouched, perfect. The people who knew her gathered in silence, and though there were tears, there were more smiles. Because Emma and Lucas's love had become something eternal, woven into the wind, the sea, the stories they left behind. The cottage became a small museum, filled with Emma's paintings and Lucas's books. People came from far away just to sit in the garden, to hear the sea, to feel, if only for a moment, what it meant to be part of a love so deep, so real, it outlived time itself. And even now, when the sky blushes at sunset, or when a lone seagull flies along the cliffs, some say they feel them there. Two souls walking together, still in love, still home. Because true love never dies. It simply finds another way to stay. Years after Emma and Lucas were gone, their story lived on, not only in books and paintings, but in the hearts of those who visited the old cottage by the sea. Parents brought their children to show them the garden where Emma once painted roses in the morning sun. Young lovers stood by the cliffs, where it was said Lucas had once read Emma his poetry under a sky full of stars. Some left notes on the doorstep, letters to the kind of love they hoped to find. No one ever took them away, and somehow they never scattered in the wind. One spring, a young painter named Elia came to the village, searching for quiet and inspiration. She had heard the story of Emma and Lucas from her grandmother, who had once visited the gallery as a girl. Elia didn't believe in soulmates until she stood in the room where Emma had painted The Return. Something in the stillness, in the light that poured through the windows, in the delicate figures on the canvas, moved her in a way she couldn't explain. She stayed in the village longer than planned. Days turned into weeks. She sketched by the sea, read in the garden, and wandered the cliffs, often pausing in the exact places where love had once bloomed. She felt their presence, not in ghosts or shadows, but in warmth, in inspiration, in the courage to hope again. One day, while painting near the shore, she met a traveler named Jonas, quiet, thoughtful, carrying a worn notebook of half-written songs. They talked about colors and chords, silence and longing. It was familiar, yet new. They didn't rush anything. They simply let time move, and their hearts speak softly to one another. And so a new story began, different, but somehow echoing the one before it. A reminder that love does not end with the lives that first gave it breath. It leaves roots, and if the soil is kind, it blooms again. In the museum beside The Return, a small plaque was added. It read, "Love is not a moment. It is a thread through time, pulling hearts toward one another again and again." In this place, love was found, and perhaps it will be found again. And in the soft light of morning, if you listen closely, the sea still carries their laughter. Their love had become part of the world, endless, unseen, and everywhere. Years melted into decades, and the cottage by the sea remained, weathered but strong, just like the love that once lived within it. Vines wrapped gently around its stone walls, and wildflowers danced in the wind along the path to the door. Locals never let it fall into silence. Every summer, the town held a small festival in honor of Emma and Lucas, a celebration of art, of words, and most of all, of love that lasts. Artists, writers, dreamers, and quiet souls came from far corners of the world to walk the same paths, to breathe the same salty air, to sit in the chair where Emma once painted, or to run their fingers along the spines of Lucas's favorite books. Each visitor left something behind. A painting, a poem, a letter, or simply a moment of stillness. And in return, they took something too, a seed of hope, the kind that only grows when touched by real love. One winter, a storm came, fierce and howling, waves crashing against the rocks with a force that shook the village. People feared the old cottage wouldn't survive. But when the storm cleared and the sun broke through, the house stood untouched, as if protected by something unseen. And many believed it was. Time did what it always does. Generations passed. Names changed. Faces grew unfamiliar. But still, the story remained. Told in bedtime tales, whispered between lovers, taught in schools as more than history, but as truth. Eventually, a young girl named Mira, quiet and curious, wandered into the museum on a rainy afternoon. She had never known love, not really. Not the kind that softens a life, not the kind that stays. But something in the paintings, in the light, in the gentle presence of the place, stirred her heart. She sat on the windowsill, just where Emma used to sit, and began to draw. Not what she saw, but what she felt. Her pencil moved with purpose, as if guided by something greater than herself. And what she drew was this: two figures walking toward each other through time, across oceans, through lifetimes. Not always finding each other in the beginning, but always finding each other in the end. Because Emma and Lucas's love had become more than a memory. It had become a part of the world's fabric, a quiet force, still working, still healing, still calling souls toward one another. And as long as someone believed in love, gently, fiercely, and fully, their story would never truly end. It would simply begin again,